is there any type of client that the systems theory works best with, or is it?
See, I'm so impassioned about this particular theoretical point of view that I can't think. I'm sure that there probably is. I couldn't identify that for you at this point because we live our lives in a relational context. So we're constantly in interaction with other people. And so from that point of view, I can't think of anyone who could live in society in total isolation. Anyone whose life is totally unaffected by the existence of other people. So in that regard, I think it has broad-based applicability to any number of clients.
So it would have to maybe be a treatment of choice for everybody?
Well, I think, even more so than being a treatment of choice, I think that what systems theory does is it attempts to reorient the way in which we think about the world. And if we're thinking about problems or human suffering, if we think about it in this sort of individual A causes B, that what systems theory, what it's done for me is it's challenged me to think in much more interactional terms, so that that I'm looking at not only how A affects B, but also how B affects A.
What about somebody like who's depressed? How could that be a systems issue? They're just depressed.
Well, because I think that depression occurs within a relational context. That if I'm feeling depressed, there's some piece of my depression that I'm thinking has to be related to a relationship that I have or don't have, a relationship that I wish to have, that there's someone else in my life who plays a role in this very deep emotion that I'm experiencing. So it's not just totally located within inside of me, but also it's something that's shared with another person in my life or a person that I wish to have in my life. So, I think that even depression in that way has a very strong systemic component. And that's not to suggest that they're, these types of questions always come up. It's not to suggest that depression may not or cannot have some biological component, but I think that doesn't preclude there also being a very strong interpersonal component as well.
We're going to be watching you work with somebody in a few minutes, Phil. And what were your goals in working with Phil?
Well, one of my broad goals with him was a broad goal I would have working with any individual is to get the individual to begin, at a point where he leaves the session buying into the notion that what he sees as his individual problem is much broader than himself. That it is caught up in a web of interactions, and that there are any number of individuals who contribute to his description of his problem. And so I'm trying, in a broader sense, to get him reoriented to think about his life in terms of interactions, relationships, and connections. So that's sort of a broad goal. And then the other, more specific goal would be to begin to get him to challenge and think more critically about some of the assertions that he makes about his life, some of the constructions he have about who he is and the significance or insignificance of what he does. So, he was a person I saw who came in with lots of, life has been inundated with denial, and denial that has supported and propelled, some bouts with alcoholism and so forth, and really wanted to sort of disrupt some of that denial so that he could get a more accurate picture of who he is, what impact his behavior, thoughts, attitudes have on others, and vice versa.
And so when we look at your role as a systems therapist in this interview we're going to see in a minute, can you set it up for us for things that maybe the viewers might want to look at for what exactly you were doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.